If you thought the information on Henry VIII was interesting, just wait till you hear about these crazy Victorians. They too thought sex with a virgin would cure syphilis, so you can imagine the types of things that were going on. The Victorians were like a layered wedding cake. The bottom was the biggest layer, and those were the masses of poverty. In the middle were the upper and middle class, and at the very top were Queen Victoria and Prince Albert. The royalty often intermarried with other royalty, which was often very close bloodlines, which caused a lot of inbreeding. Queen Victoria's father died when she was only 8 months old, and she was the only child, so she would be the heir to the throne. If you were a mother to a child who was going to take over the throne, how would you raise her? Her mother was very strict. Queen Victoria had a very secluded childhood. She did take the throne when she was 18 years old, but she had very strong prejudice. She was very willful. Anytime you are raised with a very strict background, you often feel you have such restraints that all you want to do is get out of those restraints. So as a result, she refused the influence from her mother. Queen Victoria was a very happy-go-lucky, flirtatious young woman. She loved to party. Prince Albert was actually her cousin, and it's fine to marry within your first cousin or beyond, and that is not too close of bloodlines. For her, it was love at first sight. She said, "He is so excessively handsome and has such beautiful eyes, my heart is quite gone. If I were a gentleman, I would love for a woman to say that about me." She married when she was 21. She proposed to him. It had to happen like that. She was the one to choose who she was going to be married to. She had great love and admiration for him, and their marriage was a happy one. But what happens to a sentence when you follow it with but? Kind of throws out the first statement, doesn't it? They had 9 children in 18 years. She was pregnant more often than not. Obviously, Prince Albert was passionate in the bedchamber, but he was very prudent against her dancing. He wanted her to himself, and this put an end to Victoria's fun ways. Because Prince Albert did not want Queen Victoria to have fun on the dance floor, she developed a very pronounced distaste for sex. She thought, if he's not going to let me have fun, then I don't have to enjoy sex. As a wife, I'm obligated to give it to him. I'm obligated to have his children, but I do not have to enjoy sex. She advised her daughters the way to get through the night was to shut your eyes, grit your teeth, and think of England. Not only did this affect her daughters, but this affected all the women in her kingdom. A little bit more information on Prince Albert. He died in 1861 of typhoid fever. When he died, Queen Victoria went into seclusion. She truly did love him. She was devoted to him. She wore black the rest of her life. She continued to have the maidservants bring fresh shaving water to his bedroom every day, even though he wasn't there. She left his rooms just as they were when he died. Not only did Queen Victoria's attitude about sex affect the women, but it trickled down to affect the men. Men are not as easily able to abstain from sex because of their high levels of testosterone. They tried, but they became very weak and animal in instincts. They felt if they worked hard, they could control themselves. And if they could work hard, they would rise to be a success. Because of women's sexual nature, the Victorian women, they could refrain from having sex. They felt their only purpose for having sex was to have children. So sex fundamentally became a man's problem. It became an era of hostility between men and women. Women were considered second-class citizens. Men became aggressors, so aggressive that on their honeymoon nights they had to give chloroform to their brides because they would be so forceful because they had waited so long to have sex. Even though women were considered second-class citizens because men could not refrain, they became degraded. Prostitution flourished. The men were not having sex with their wives, but that did not mean they were not having sex. They would sneak out. They would say, I'm going for a stroll, or I'm going for a smoke. And they would walk down the street and use the services of prostitutes. In some information you're going to learn later in the statistics, you're going to see that many 12-year-old girls in the Victorian era were not virgins. The thing to do for a man would be to go find a 12-year-old and have sex with her. Part of the situation here was if they had sex with a virgin, that would take away syphilis, and many 12-year-olds were virgins. Beyond that, they probably weren't, because women married at a young age, they had sex at a young age. Well, these 12-year-old girls then often lost their right to even be married, and often they themselves would become prostitutes. The men that had Christian beliefs, they called them muscular Christians. They could control their passion. They could refrain. They would exercise a lot, fast, avoid sexual literature for fear that they would become aroused, slept on a hard bed, they wouldn't drink, and just practice their religion. And they slept with these around their penises. Guess what this is called? This is called a prick. If you're a male, have you ever been called a prick? If so, now you know where that term comes from. The theory behind this was the men did not want to lose control. They did not want to have an erection when they didn't want to have it. And what we know is that men have erections about every 2 hours every night while they're sleeping. It's just a natural process. Well, if they had an erection, they felt they were losing control, so they would sleep with this around their penis, so if they had an erection, it would wake them up and they could control that erection. Crazy idea, isn't it? The Victorians had a semen theory. They only had so much semen, and if they wasted it, used it up, it would help them sire puny kids. It would make them impotent, not being able to have sex. So they did not want to have sex other than when they wanted to have it. They were against masturbation. The children that they sired, if they were not healthy children, this was not because the men had too much sex, it was because of the syphilis. Semen developed the same characteristics of money. It was important that they had money. It's important that they saved their semen. So it was wrong to waste it on pleasure. They had money metaphors. If they were having an orgasm, they had spent. If they were ejaculating, they were spending. Chaste meant the women were saving themselves for marriage. And you probably have heard that. Now we know that came from the Victorians. And women who wasted their virginity prior to marriage often lost their opportunity to marry at all. So they likely became prostitutes. When it comes to today's society, what sexually stimulates males as far as women's body parts? Probably you would say buttocks, you would say breasts. Well, for the Victorians, it was the legs. And men, because they did not want to become aroused, did not want to see legs. Not only in fashion on women, but also in home decor. So if you go into a Victorian decorated home, you will see fabric covering everything, even piano benches. Your bed skirts that you have around your beds today, those were developed for the Victorians so that they didn't see bed legs. Well, the Victorian dresses, while they were long and covered legs, often the bust would spill over in these dresses, but that was no big deal to the men. The women wore corsets, and I have a slide to show you what a corset looked like, so we'll see that in a bit. Art museums conducted separate tours because heaven forbid you'd go into a museum and see a nude statue in mixed company. Physicians were not allowed to touch women's bodies. They would have a doll and the women just would point to the doll. So if you had a stomach ache, if you had infertility, if whatever, and pointed to a stomach, they wouldn't know specifically what was wrong. They would just treat you as a general thing, not knowing exactly if it was digestive issues or problems with menstrual cycles. Here's the slide I was referring to about the corset. On the left, the top picture is a picture of the corset, and you can see there's no cups for the breasts. So when the women put these on, it would just smoosh up the breasts, and then they would have all this cleavage. The bottom picture is a picture of the back. How a woman would put this on would be she would put it on the bed, she would lay on the bed, and then somebody would lace it up. And while they were lacing it up, she would hold her breath so tight and suck in her stomach and waist that they would cinch it up so it would stay that tight. The first picture of the woman with, you can see the rib cage, that shows what a normal woman's rib cage would look like. The next picture over shows what a woman's body would look like. The goal was the third picture, having the waist be so skinny. This would be what we would refer to as an hourglass figure. Well, look what happened to the rib cage when the women would wear these corsets. It just brought those ribs in. Look at the spine, the lower picture in the right-hand corner, cause all kinds of spinal problems. The women would have indigestion problems. They would have infertility problems, all created by this undergarment called a corset. As we think about the Victorians and this goal to have their waists be this thin, think about today and what women, young girls, teenagers, young women, women of all ages, do to their bodies to create the look that they want. We do all kinds of things that can compromise our health. To the Victorians, everything was blamed on masturbation. If they masturbated, they might become an epileptic. They might become impotent. If they were insane, lost their eyesight, hair grew on the palms of their hand. This was all related to the fact that they masturbated. They dreaded orgasm because that meant they lost control. And they literally rewrote the dictionary. As you can see, the language for terms changed. Here is a continuation of the different terms they called things. Because of Queen Victoria's pronounced distaste for sex, it certainly changed the lives of people during that era. One thing that was positive that came out of that, if you had 9 children in 18 years, you would want some pain relief. So she was the first one to use chloroform when she had her babies. Thank heavens we have a safer form of pain control today in our epidurals. At the end of the 19th century, we finally saw Victorian prudishness declining because we had the emergence of sexual knowledge. We knew that the guys did not have to sleep with those pricks around their penises because it was okay to have nocturnal erections. It was not safe for women to wear corsets because it was compromising their health.